She stepped into a wedding that wasn't meant for her. Stood beneath vows that weren't her destiny. And before she could turn back, a cold billionaire claimed her as his bride in front of everyone. What she did next didn't just shock him, it rewrote both their fates. The moment she pushed open the heavy oak doors, the world seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The soft glow of chandeliers, the carefully arranged flowers, and the gentle hum of a string quartet filled the hall with an air of perfection. Every detail whispered of love, promises, and lifelong commitments, but none of it was meant for her. She froze for a fraction of a second, realizing too late that she had walked into the wrong wedding. Her pulse raced as she glanced around, seeing familiar faces confused and strangers smiling politely, thinking she belonged there. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing her inner turmoil. She had imagined attending weddings countless times in her life, but never like this, never by mistake, and never standing beneath an arch of roses that symbolized someone else's love story. The soft rustle of her dress drew the attention of every guest in the room, and 1,000 pairs of eyes turned toward her, curiosity and surprise mingling in the air. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but deeper than that, an inexplicable sense of destiny tugged at her heart. She had come to the wrong place by accident, yet something about this hall, the light, the sound, felt strangely magnetic. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring her here at precisely this moment. The bride she had intended to meet had already begun her walk down the aisle, and she realized she had no choice but to pause at the threshold. Each second stretched into eternity as whispers and murmurs floated around her like drifting petals. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Should she turn and leave? Should she pretend nothing had happened? But the pull of the moment anchored her in place. She caught sight of him, the man at the altar, tall, composed, with a presence that seemed to command the air itself. Their eyes met for the briefest instant, and something unspoken passed between them. Confusion, shock, perhaps a flicker of curiosity, but also, against all logic, an unexpected spark. She realized then that walking into the wrong wedding was more than a mistake. It was a collision of paths, a moment suspended between fear and fascination. Every instinct screamed for her to retreat, but another voice, quieter yet impossible to ignore, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a story she was meant to be part of. He stood at the altar like a sculpture carved from ice, every line of his face sharp, every movement precise, every word measured. The guests had murmured about him long before this day, how he was untouchable, unyielding, a man whose fortune rivaled kingdoms, and whose heart was said to be locked away behind walls no one could scale. And yet, as she stepped into the hall by mistake, his gaze found her with a precision that seemed almost unreal. It was cold, calculating, and yet, beneath that icy veneer, there was something she couldn't name, a flicker of intrigue, a quiet challenge, a question he had never asked aloud. Without warning, his deep, commanding voice filled the room, slicing through the delicate music and the whispers of the guests. "She is my bride," he declared, his tone leaving no room for argument, no space for denial. The hall fell silent, the air thick with shock and disbelief. All eyes turned to her, and for a moment, she felt like a character caught in someone else's story, thrust into a narrative she had never rehearsed for. The declaration was so bold, so unexpected, that it left her heart hammering, her mind spinning, and yet, it also sparked an unfamiliar thrill, an awareness that this man's power extended beyond wealth and influence. It reached into the very moment she stood frozen before him. There was a sharp elegance in the way he carried himself, the way he spoke as if ownership and authority were inseparable from his being. Yet there was also a vulnerability hidden beneath that cold exterior, revealed only in the intensity of his gaze when it lingered on her. She noticed the slight hesitation in his posture, the imperceptible tightening of his jaw, signs that perhaps he had not expected the effect she would have on him. The guests exchanged glances, some shocked, some intrigued, as the billionaire's words hung in the air like an unbreakable bond. Her mind raced with questions. Was this a cruel joke? A reckless challenge? Or was it something else entirely? An instinctive recognition, a pull of destiny that neither of them had the courage to name yet. The man before her, so distant and untouchable to the world, had chosen this moment to bridge the gap between them, using the boldest of gestures to draw her into his orbit. She realized, in that instant, that nothing would ever be the same again. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath as all eyes waited for her reaction. She could have panicked, turned, or let the moment swallow her whole, but she didn't. Instead, she drew in a steadying breath, feeling the rhythm of her own heartbeat match the quiet strength building within her. The cold billionaire had claimed her in front of the world, yet she realized in that instant that the only power she truly possessed was the courage to respond on her own terms. Her gaze met his, unwavering, and for the first time, she saw not just the power and pride in his eyes, but something else, curiosity, and perhaps a spark of respect. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation, but she refused to be intimidated. Her voice, soft yet clear, cut through the stillness. She reminded him, and everyone present, that a bride is not taken by announcement, she is chosen. And she was choosing herself, choosing to speak her truth even when the world seemed ready to dictate her fate. It was in the way she held herself, poised yet unyielding, that the room began to shift. What had seemed like a moment of vulnerability transformed into a display of inner strength. She did not retreat into fear, nor did she bow to the grandeur of wealth and power that loomed over her. Instead, she embraced the courage of authenticity, standing as a living testament to the idea that true strength often comes in quiet, unassuming moments of defiance. Her words, measured and deliberate, left an imprint on him that no declaration of ownership ever could. The cold billionaire, accustomed to commanding and receiving immediate compliance, felt something unfamiliar stir within him, a sense of challenge that was not offensive but magnetic, a pull he could neither ignore nor resist. Her bravery was not a confrontation, it was an invitation. And he, for the first time in a long while, recognized that the woman before him was not just another presence in his carefully controlled world, but someone who could reach parts of him that no one else had touched. As she spoke, the subtle strength in her demeanor began to unravel the layers of his icy exterior. Each word, each carefully measured pause, chipped away at his reserve, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the billionaire mask, a man capable of being moved, inspired, and perhaps even loved. The hall seemed to fade away, leaving only the tension, the spark, and the undeniable electricity of two worlds colliding in a single, extraordinary moment. The cold billionaire, a man whose presence usually silenced rooms and hearts alike, found himself unsettled in a way he had never anticipated. She had walked into his life like a sudden, bright light, challenging the meticulous order he had built around himself. For the first time, he noticed the small things, the way her eyes held warmth even in confusion, the quiet strength behind her every gesture, and the way she refused to be cowed by his reputation or wealth. Each subtle defiance, each courageous word, chipped away at the layers of ice he had carefully constructed over years of solitude. He had built walls so high that even those closest to him rarely saw the man within. But now, with her standing before him, fearless and unyielding, those walls trembled. He felt the stirrings of something dangerous, something that threatened the very foundation of his control, curiosity, admiration, and perhaps even desire. It was confusing, unsettling, and intoxicating all at once. She didn't seek to break him, she simply existed as she was, and in doing so, she illuminated the cracks he had hidden from the world and, until now, from himself. Her laughter, light and spontaneous, echoed in the halls of his mind long after the moment had passed. Her words, full of honesty and unexpected insight, lingered like a melody he couldn't forget. For someone used to commanding respect with his wealth and reputation, this was an entirely different challenge. Here was a woman who did not bend, who did not tremble, who did not fall in line with the expectations of those around her. And yet, despite her strength, there was a softness that beckoned him closer, a vulnerability that invited him to step out from behind his mask. He caught himself observing the smallest details, the curve of her smile, the flicker of amusement in her eyes, the way her hair fell over her shoulders as she turned to face the room. It was in these fleeting moments that the ice around his heart began to soften, revealing something he had long denied himself, the capacity to feel, to care, and to be moved by someone wholly and without reservation. Each shared glance, each fleeting touch of understanding, became a quiet battle against his own control, challenging him to embrace emotions he had long deemed unnecessary. And in the stillness between them, in the unspoken tension and subtle electricity, he realized that love was not a force to command or conquer, it was something he might only be able to experience if he dared to let go, to surrender to the warmth that she unknowingly brought into his life. What began as a mistaken step into the wrong wedding slowly transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated. At first, it seemed like a collision of worlds, a chaotic, unplanned moment that belonged in a storybook, not reality. Yet every glance, every word, and every shared silence began to weave a thread between them, connecting two lives that had seemed destined to remain separate. The accidental meeting, the bold declaration, and her fearless response became the unlikely beginning of a bond that neither circumstance nor caution could unravel. In the quiet moments after the initial shock faded, he found himself seeking her presence, drawn to her in ways that defied logic or expectation. The coldness he had always relied upon to maintain control now felt like a barrier he no longer wished to uphold. She, in turn, discovered that what had started as fear and uncertainty slowly turned into curiosity and longing. The world might have labeled their encounter as scandalous or improper, but within the private corners of their hearts, it was beginning to feel like fate. Every accidental brush of hands, every fleeting touch, seemed to speak volumes that words could not capture. They found themselves talking in moments that should have been ordinary, discovering shared thoughts and subtle compatibilities that made the world outside fade into insignificance. What had been a random mistake was revealing itself as a convergence of timing, of choices, and of hearts willing to recognize one another. She saw beyond his carefully constructed exterior, glimpsing the man who had been hidden behind ice and pride, and he saw her courage, her authenticity, and the warmth that could melt even the most guarded soul. As days turned into shared moments, he began to anticipate her laughter, her opinions, the way she moved through a room with confidence and grace. And she, too, felt a growing trust, a willingness to allow him into her world in a way she had never imagined. Each accidental encounter, each misstep in the beginning, now felt purposeful, as though destiny had orchestrated every tiny detail to bring them together. It became clear to both of them that love was not always planned, and sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with a single, unforeseen moment. What had started as an error, a misstep, an entrance into the wrong place at the wrong time, was slowly unfolding into a journey neither had anticipated, one that was filled with discovery, emotion, and the quiet realization that life sometimes leads the heart exactly where it is meant to go.